Cool. Hey, Kris is here too. Hey, Kris. Hey, Wayne. Welcome, guys. Give me a second. I'm going to go ahead and shuffle that video because it's now working the live stream for me. Welcome to everybody that stuck around. My stream dropped. My source dropped. We had to jump around, get a backup going. But that's why we're prepared for that. And thank you, Maverick. You were strong and stable. And now I'm going to go back to the original one. Hey, Kris. Thanks for joining us again.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I saw your tweets, and there's a lot of love on Twitter for you. That's wonderful. And of course, you're
Is it love though?
Well, they're going to be here watching Rumble and YouTube. We gave them the links, and a lot of people, a lot of people are going to check it out. I'm expecting just one more. So Joe might be joining us again, but we're going to keep this one a little bit short, or not short, but a smaller group, so we can each have a bit more chance to talk about what we're here to spread the messages of. Wayne, you're chatty and you missed the first half. There was a lot of excitement because that was an impeached witness multiple times. I had to let people know that we were watching the Tour de Ottawa, which is like the Tour de France, just backpedaling, because that's all they were doing the entire time, the first one. So OPS is sticking to the drum beats of we had no resources, we had no plan, we didn't know what was coming, and it's everybody else's fault. But the OPP is a complete juxtaposition on them, completely different. I take notes as I'm going along when I hear things that I need to address that are like wrong or lies or misinformation or whatnot. I have 4 pages from the first witness and none so far from the OPP. I believe his testimony so far. Kris, yeah, I love Kris's opinion too there, James. James is one of our regular. I think we're Bluetoothing into your ear while you work. The phone is got a big phone bill this month because he's 3G in it or 5G in it or whatever. But yeah, James, Kris is an amazing person. Lucky to have met him. And I see Joe is giving us a smile. So Joe, if you have that link, come on in, and we'll get you going. All right, so Kris, I want to start with you because we got just onto the iceberg, just the tip of the iceberg with you yesterday around the opposition, First Nations, protesting, how this is all changing now. And if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind, hearing a little bit more about what you think could be coming down if we do have a central command, a national police force, and some sort of intelligence agency now. Because now I'm hearing nothing but bad intelligence and good intelligence, and they don't know the difference. So are we going to be seeing that, and what do you think?
Well, I think it's interesting because it's one of those scenarios where I think a lot of people are looking at it from okay, we went along with it at the time, and you go back over it, and same thing with a lot of the stuff we see with the COVID restrictions and stuff. We don't really see a lot of scientific basis. With here, we don't see a lot of legal. I think that it would probably spook a lot of people. Like it's one of those things where how well informed will the public be that this is happening? And I won't believe any public, like the polling and stuff is just so, I don't trust a lot of the data we see with online polling and other these internal polls that get released as far as the sample size. But when you look at, it'll really come down to how vocal the conservatives are, I think, with regards to, okay, this is what they're doing, these are the impacts, right? As opposed to just, I don't like standing up and vilifying. You got to be very clear with the public and let them know this is what the impacts are going to be. I don't want to play the word games or the hashtags or anything like that. Specifically with First Nations, it's a lot more complicated. Like I said yesterday, you have the 650 plus in the country, all of them autonomous and have their own, they're union, right? Some of them are with tribal councils, some of them are not. So the landscape, when you're looking at that, those that are already at a certain level of economic development, when you look at the employment numbers and you look at just the functionality of the nation as itself, or the reserve, the band, tribal, it's the ones that are trying to come up, I think, would be the ones that will be the most impacted. I think that it creates a lack of certainty, and that's when it comes to business, you need certainty to be able to get investment, to make sure you're going to be able to see the projects start to finish. And that's what a lot of the problems happen. It is trying to get it over the finish line. And with First Nations, if you have this kind of vehicle, which I would imagine would have FinTrack and other things, it's a matter of who the leader is and which ideology of the time is running, right? Like right now, If a First Nation wanted to protest a pipeline, we saw with the blockades, very different approach, right? And there needs to be that. And what I think the biggest risk here is the omission of dialogue that would occur. So I would say, if this is what's going to happen, where you're going to have a centralized command, it'll be upon the local Indigenous communities and Indigenous groups to make sure that they have a united front towards liaison, communications, dialogue, standard operating procedures. Not to say that the government will follow them, but to know that at any moment, it's a tool that I don't like government having, because a lot of the times when I was dealing with it, it's a matter of delaying. Like if I was ever working, a couple of projects I worked on in the past was just helping get permits and stuff for some resource development. But it was between, there was an investor and then there was a First Nation, and coming together is trying to make sure everybody was happy. And in those situations, it went smoothly because there was enough dialogue happening throughout. Everything was on the table. All the families from the nation was included. There was enough roundabout dialogue. But my fear is you get to this point where all the government has to do is sit back and let timelines pass. From what I've seen so far with this inquiry, they wanted to use the Emergencies Act. They've come up with ridiculous reasons as to why they think it should be justified. Yesterday we heard it was not really violence, but it was feelings. So what does that mean? What does the speed of science mean? Like, all of this language is being distorted. And in these scenarios where if you give government centralized control over 650, some would argue they already have centralized control through the Indian Act. I get that. But with regards to their self-determination and their ability to make decisions and make, decisions where the government's not going to interfere, or if you have, again, like on one First Nation, you could be evenly split. You got 6 families, you got 3 that are against natural resource development, you got 3 that are for it. So you always hit those stalemates. And I don't like how the louder you get, it seems to be the response is more authoritarian each time. So if I'm using this as a metric of standard as far as if there is a protest, Emergencies Act type powers give that kind of centralized control, taking it away from all of the local players. I can't see how that turns out well for anybody. Maybe for the establishment or the hierarchy of government top down, but not for those who are supposed to be serving.
Yeah, and with this protest, maybe it'll become the template or the standard of what, if it reaches this level, we trigger additional actions. And what we didn't see in this protest was destruction of property, real threats of personal violence, holding of weapons, holding of signs that are explicit on violence, blocking roads completely, digging up, blocking train tracks, all the types of things that we see in other protests across Canada that do happen. So clearly, if this is going to be the standard where you're just disrupting something, whether it's a business or government or something, if that's now the new standard because there's an economic tie or whatnot, if that's a new standard, basically every protest I've seen in the last 30 years or so will now trigger this new reaction. So we're already seeing the financial system have some changes. Freeland brought in some of the changes. Some of them are more permanent. And when it comes to the recommendations from this inquiry, that's still yet to come. We're not even sure what is going to be put on top of that. The recommendation might come along that says, that financial tool worked really great. I've determined that because that threat of asset seizure was there, that was enough to compel everybody. Maybe he comes out and says, that's a valid tool next time. And then they actually give themselves that one. So we got to pay close attention to what they're using as tools, the past tools, the new tools, and then the tools coming up. And when they do things with like financial, let me ask you, and sorry for the ignorance on this, is there any co-op or banks for First Nations outside of the national banks? Like, do they have any credit unions or co-ops that they own?
I know that they're working towards it. Okay, so I'll be honest. It's been 2 or 3 years since I've had my ear to the ground involved in. It was probably about 8 months before the pandemic hit was one of my last interactions. But over the previous 5 years or so, it has been. Put it this way: Indigenous communities are well aware that they need to have more sovereignty over and control over their finances. So they're very, very aware. I've been in meetings and stuff where a centralized bank was being discussed out of the U.S. And so I know there. Let me get back to you on that question. I will go and see where things are at now, but I know that they're very aware, and especially after the with the bank seizures and the Rogers, So I'm curious to see where some of those groups are at. I don't want to name them here. I'll just go and take a look.
For sure.
And
yeah, and it's been a long time since I looked at any of their statutes around sovereignty, but I do believe they have the ability to, if they wanted to. I don't think there's any wording in there that would stop them. And it would be credit union, because I don't think they would want a charter. But hey, if we had a 6th chartered national bank that was not tied to the main 5, I think it'd be a benefit to Canada, and I think they would actually get a lot of business if someone did that. Yeah, because I think that could be coming for sure. We already have some of them. Now, if we define what a protest means, so hey, if you block a railroad that happens to be going towards Montreal, the economic impact is this million per day. That exceeds the limit of $0 per day of economic impact. Therefore, we now have to shut you down with force. So I hope we don't head that way. And Wayne, you came in at the, I think you just missed the first witness completely, but you did come in and catch the second one. And at first you weren't sure, how it was for us, and whether or not they were being truthful and stuff. But now you've seen a little bit of more of the OPP. This is a First Nations representative who works on the protest. He's well accomplished. You can tell by his demeanor. He's comfortable. He's telling the truth. And these are one of the professionals that could have negotiated a peaceful resolution. And he's clearly stating, here's my job. I'm very good at it. Our team's wonderful. We have plenty of experience from every type of Canadian. And he's also using, proper words, not war lingo, when he's talking about people that he's working with. He doesn't even see them as foes. He just sees them as somebody to talk to. What do you think from that? Again, we're seeing, it looks like somebody that said we could have solved this peacefully. We had the tools, we had the ability. But for some reason, as he stated, things changed with OPS, and the Coventry incident really muddied the water. And and then he's using that they're using that as an example that the protesters changed their tone and were no longer cooperating. When you break down the conversation on purpose, the negotiation on purpose, you shouldn't be allowed to point to that as proof that it broke down. You created it. Right. But yeah, what's your take there, Wayne, on that one? I think we're seeing a lot more honesty this time around.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he wanted to elaborate several times, but because the council doesn't want to hear that damaging evidence, we haven't got time for this. We need to move on. But he's willing to say much more. But as soon as the guy can actually understand that it's going the wrong way, it's like, okay, we'll move on. So yeah, it definitely sounds as though he's talking for the people. I mean, I don't really know the guy, but yeah, it's certainly a different day, isn't it?
It sure is. And we haven't had an opportunity for impeachment yet. The previous witness, he was impeached by the committee council. It was the first time he was impeached with his own document that he just claimed he didn't remember. Nothing like, I don't think we'll see anything like that here. The OPP, they're not redacting like we see with the OPS. You'll see the OPS will have notes, and then you'll have big blocks just chunked out. You don't see that with the OPP. And I think that's, again, another one of those juxtapositions. When we see the evidence provided by both sides, one is, being very delicate and careful about what's in there. And then the other one says, there you go, transparency. We thought we had a good position. We don't have Joe yet, so we'll keep going here, Kris.
I mean, you could tell when he was talking, he was very relaxed and calm. He didn't need to pause to think of a lie that didn't make him look as bad, like Bell or a few of the others. It was just very relaxed, very charming conversation.
Yeah, and there's a really good, his name's Spidey. I think his channel's called Behavioral Artist out of Montreal. And he does a lot of body language work. And it's really interesting to listen to. He explains how you look for clusters of behavior and you don't necessarily look for one. and you can tell. Well, you can't tell, but you can do your best to see if there's stress, and if there's stress, it could indicate that there's more to it. One of them is whether or not they can illustrate and use their hands, and whether or not the hands match the words, because when you're lying, your processing is not fast enough to spit out a lie and then act the lie with your hands. So when someone goes, we had one, two, three people show up, and then the third one did, like when they're using their hands while they talk, and when it matches, that's just truth. They're not filtering. They're not trying to put on a show. They're not doing anything like that. The first witness, we saw very little body language. He was very uncomfortable, and a lot of backpedaling. But I'm very excited to see what else we get out of this one. So back to Kris. Okay, so we're talking about how First Nations and politically yesterday, but now let's also talk a little bit about the West. You are in BC. I'm in Alberta. If Joe joins us, he's in Edmonton. We know that the convoy kind of started in BC. Some of the first trucks started in BC, made their way across Alberta, picked up steam, and went on. We're hearing some testimony, especially last week, and I'm sure we'll hear some more this week from other OPS officers, that it was a charge from the West. It was a charge from the West. And they kind of started it. And then other convoys were coming from all over. Are we fed up in the West? Are we fed up with government overreach, federalism? Are we just fed up and now it's time to put on and embrace the label of maverick or anti-government or whatever they want to label us as? Is it time to wear that label proudly? Because I think it might be time to stand up proudly. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that there's merit to both sides, right? My fear with that is okay, to put it this way, I think that you can look at multiple different things that you could consider would be the flashpoint that led to the rollout, right? And even for me, it took me 3 days to be like, is this real? And we start seeing more and more. So I think that even those that started it, although it does look like even if the tactics and logistics of the strategy and all that could have been laid out en route. But I still think there was some genuine level towards, here's what we want to do, here's what we want to accomplish, we're doing it, whoever wants to get on board, let's get this moving. And so I bet you if you ask the people who originally started this, they had no idea what it was going to turn into. And so what I think it comes back to is that this idea that a lot of us are the minority opinion, and that we're in this situation because we've all been isolated. The media tells us we're a minority, or our leader says we're a fringe, unacceptable, all this stuff. But the convoy was really the first time we got to see, okay, where's Canada at? Are we okay with this? Because I don't believe most of it, like 99% of the Canadians I met in my life are not like that. And you can look at the fear response and, give some leniency depending on what people turned into during those 2 years, and some are still willing with opinions. But as far as, I think it's one of those things where I think it would be a disservice to the convoy to claim it as being a Western thing. I think that it was just the first people to say, screw this, I've been in rooms before and nobody puts their hands up and say, you go, okay, I'll do it. And start that process. But there is an argument to be made with regards to the autonomy that each province has, because that's what we've really seen here. You can have a charter, you can have a constitution, but a public health emergency is declared, none of that matters. It takes us 2 years to get into court. Well, how much damage has been done? And we've seen that, right? And even in a situation where we knew the harms. I come from a social services background, right? And advocacy, mental health, all these kinds of things. And I'm just like, nobody? Where are all the early childhood development people, right? And so it is one of those things where I think that there is an argument to be made, for sure, that it started there, but the flicker turned into a flame. So it's whoever carried the torch. It would have been interesting to see if it started in the east, right? Would people have come? Or if it started in the middle, would people have? And I think that, for me, it took 3 days, like I said. So it's a matter of people, I think, were shocked as it happened. And then when we saw it played out, I thought to myself, it couldn't have been better, with no violence, bounty castles, kids, families. It took away all of their arguments that they still decided to label people with. But not to take away, I think there's something to be said with regards to how the states operates, having autonomy with republic versus a constitutional democracy, because we don't have enough safety nets to protect the public when people want to lose their minds and impose policies without providing evidence. I'm sorry, I don't trust you. Show me your evidence. period. And what Danielle Smith's doing in Alberta, I think is, I don't know if it's going to go, maybe Saskatchewan. BC, I'm hoping is not a lost cause. It's a beautiful place. If you just look at Vancouver and all the rest of it, I think more rural, the further you get out from Vancouver, Richmond, Surrey, past there, and further north, nobody wants to put up with this stuff. They want to do what's right by their family and by their neighbors, but the manipulation, I think, is the biggest mistake they ever made. The coercion was really, really off the charts here, and it still is. You go to my health minister's Twitter page, and it's just vaccine clinic here, vaccine clinic here, vaccine clinic all the time, nonstop, totally disconnected from the harms that have been caused. I'll stop there.
You don't have to stop there. Do you think maybe possibly Jason Kenney kind of stoked it by giving us in Alberta, at least at the beginning, the idea that, yeah, we're going to stand up and we're not going to do it. And then slowly, as you know, the press is calling Alberta all these names, and globally is calling Alberta the root of all problems. Slowly, he then starts to, like we heard yesterday from Etienne, that he saw that it was changing into from no to maybe, and then to yes. Do you think that maybe because that happened, we saw a leader that we thought was strong get weak for whatever reason, maybe through name calling or political pressure or whatever it was? Do you think that's when we said, okay, enough? We can't even follow our leader because our leader is getting weak here, and that's it. And that was the final straw for a lot of people around here, because who's speaking for you now? We just lost the premier. We don't have strong representation from the MPs. MLAs are doing some squawking, but they don't seem to have enough power. So was that the final straw for Alberta, and maybe not so much just the West, but at least in Alberta, because we did have, I know I was proud. I know my neighbors were proud when he came out and said, no, we're not doing it. And we, happily walked the streets and enjoyed it. But then when he switched it and put it on us with no new information, in fact, the information was just getting worse for it. Do you think that was enough to get us going to say, enough, we're going to join this protest, this convoy starting in BC, and snowball from there? And including with the Coots stuff too, because Alberta was the only Western province that also did some demonstrations that large on the border. Do you think we just had enough?
Well, I think it's, and I'm not by far not a Kenney apologist, but I look at the landscape that he had with AHS, and I think when removing Verna Yu, I think he came out with good intentions. I still think he's a globalist, right? But at the same time, I've never had direct interactions with him, but people around him that said, he does shoot straight, but at the same time, he's bendable. Okay, well, that makes sense. But in his situation, coming out against it, when you have this machine, like what we see with happening with Danielle, anybody speaks out against the narrative. Well, back then, it was even more hyper, right? And so I start looking at AHS, and Dr. Makis covers a lot of the problems with AHS, right? He's the first person that made me kind of go, okay, there might be some difficulties here. And I saw a lot of carryovers from the Notley government that were causing a lot of problems. And so for me, I thought to myself, he's in a very difficult situation. He comes out, he may be doing it on principle, but you've got your health services and the executive in Hinshaw. They've all towed this one line. Mm-hmm. They put him in a difficult spot. But I think it was good because, like you said, had he held more of a Danielle Smith position, I don't know how much Alberta would have been like, screw this. We got to get involved. This is not a, we got to stand up. This is our moment, right? So I look at both sides as far as what, he didn't really have a choice unless he wanted to stand on principle. And I still think, take a Kerry Lake approach. The media attacks with ridiculousness. Get in their face and point out how ridiculous they are. And eventually they'll either, change their tune, or every now and again, you're going to make a reporter look really bad. And it'll be a clip that goes viral that shows how biased our media is. Like with Aiken and all these other people that just think they have absolutely no accountability for what they do. Just stoke the fire. You got to get in their face. Not aggressive. Mocking is the best tool. It's more healthy as well than carrying anger with you.
Well, be careful. If you mock too much, you'll be designated as a terrorist group. Just ask Dialong. Right? You mock too well.
I didn't catch the clip yesterday. I just saw Marazzo tweet out that they actually went there, and I'm like, so I'm Googling just to see where to get that soundbite, because it's a perfect example as well too. But it shows the confidence that they have over the establishment narrative, because there's not going to be anyone that goes on CBC. You're not going to have a pundit on that says, by the way, that's a bloody meme. What are you doing? Like you're that desperate for justification to brutalize your people that you're going to use a meme to do so. That's interesting.
Yeah, it was the only boogeyman. They probably just said, "Do we have any boogeyman?" And they said, "Nope." And they go, "What's the next we got?" And they said, "I don't know. These guys seem to have a cool logo. Let's blame them. They don't like you, so will that work?" And then
Well, they
cough,
always
cough.
look for someone. That's what I said when the conflict
Mhm.
first started. Like, I hope my message when I was on my old account was, don't centralize your leadership. Don't give them a figurehead.
Mhm.
Again, it's, collaborate, have liaisons, and it's not, I didn't do that. That's what they already had planned, and that's what they did. They did everything perfect. Some of the stuff that was said, and if you want to be critical, but as far as that, just comes down to professionalism, not criminality, violence, and all this other stuff, right? And so when you have people that are from all backgrounds, like using race, when I started seeing with Rupa out there on the ground, like it was the internet that really, without it, if we didn't have streams, if we didn't have people that were out there, think of how easy that narrative could have been created. Similar to January 6th, right? It's just like, that's kind of what I think they might have been looking for, is that,
Mhm.
oh, we're going to overthrow our government. Are you kidding me? We have systems and processes in place. We're looking for, that kind of thing. But we're slowly seeing that a lot of those systems seem to be, to put it mildly, less than full of integrity. But moving forward, I think that the Canadians realized, out of the convoy, they realized that we are not alone. There are
Oh, for sure.
many of us. And so if round 2 happens again, I'm nervous. But I think it'll probably happen anyways, because they don't seem to be slowing down. But I think Canadians are smart enough to know that, like, not smart enough. I mean, they can see what happened. They can expect, if the government sees another one of these coming, do it the exact same way. Keep out the groups that are looking to agitate, and don't allow for people to grab the spotlight. Keep the politics out of it. If it's in the spring, if they don't want bouncy castles, let's do slip and slides.
Yeah, and I think you read my mind, because I was about to ask Wayne something related to that. So, Wayne, February 13th is when this report from this inquiry commission should be presented. It could come on or before February 13th, 2023, because it has to be submitted to the Senate and the House by within 1 year of its invocation, and that was February 14th. If it comes back and it says, basically, in a nutshell, protesters did nothing wrong, police overreacted, and federal government was the instigator and the catalyst to the overreaction. Here are now some safeguards we put in place, and the government has to jump through these hoops if they even come close to trying to use that again. And then that spurs on a desire to have the second one, the part two, go and finish this up. The conclusion. Let's go and finish that chat, whatever it's called. If Canada did do that, and if Canada had another organized large protest, trucks, farms, everything, and let's say they even put it all outside of the city, and then they bust and carpooled themselves all in and just had a massive protest on Parliament Hill. Do you think the world would look at that as a bunch of whiny babies going at it again? Or do you think that would be inspiration to other countries and other people to watch and maybe do something similar themselves? What would be your take if Canada did that again?
No, it'd definitely be a positive, because I mean, just look at what's happening in Europe. I mean, they're all looking at their either mandates, protests, the fertilizer, the collapsing of farming. We know it's all linked, and each country that then rises up is seen as inspirational. All the countries joined together in America after the truckers in Canada. It
That's
was an
right.
amazing event.
It
But you
fizzled, but it
still,
was a good start.
well, that's right. Yeah, but that's the thing, isn't it? Unless we see everything that's going on, why did it fizzle out? Was there too much comeback from the police? Like in Canada, they froze the bank accounts. I mean, was there a similar sort of thing going on in America? You don't know everything unless you see all these podcasts, like some of you guys from Canada were streaming 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you saw actually every single thing, you wouldn't really understand why. I mean, some of the ones in was it Holland? I think they had these tractors driving around the field like a bicycle. There were so many of them. It was just certain things that they're doing to attract attention, because they knew that helicopters would fly over, and of course they'd see it.
Yes,
But
I saw that.
you can shut down the media, but you can't shut down everything. they will find a way to get the message out.
Yeah, and do you think that this is connected to a single plan, or is just coincidental that all these countries are having protests for similar reasons around overreach mandates and things like fertilizer, water, other intrusions into the regular business and lives of people? Do you think that's just a coincidence that, this is all happening at the same time? Or is it maybe a little bit more orchestrated? We don't have to get into too deep on that, but when multiple events happen, very similar, same tone, same rhetoric, just different language, you start to wonder, is there a common script? And they just did Google Translate on it and send it out. Because I can tell you the media in Canada definitely had a script, because it was the so-called Freedom Convoy. So-called everywhere. You would see that preface, Freedom Convoy. So we had a script here. But do you think maybe there's a global something going on, because this seems to be at least similar, if not coordinated?
Yeah, did the Canadian government have a media contract with all the medias? Because
Basically,
it
basically,
was several hundred million to basically not put anything out negative to pharmaceutical industry. But then anytime we held a protest in London, I mean, I say we because I only went to 2 of them. I just wasn't strong enough to go. But they had like 2 to 3 million people marching around the city of London, which is quite a spectacle. But no media would cover it.
I didn't hear about it.
Social media. But if they did actually put something in the paper, it would be anti-vaxxers, and they'd film a short section that showed maybe a dozen people turned up. Let's forget about the 2 million people behind me.
Right.
But these few anti-vaxxers.
And disheveled a bit, and maybe the hair is in the wind, is up all over the place. And, those are the people they're searching for.
Take the most radical person to portray the masses. You can take reasoning away only if it paints your picture you're trying to portray. Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, and in Canada, we didn't even have the pictures. They just used the names and the labels and said the entire group is that way. We didn't even have the disheveled or the radical or even a video of some crazy talk. I think the closest we got would have been, and sorry if you're listening and you don't like this, but maybe Pat King's rhetoric was a little bit close to the line. But that would be it. That'd be it. He wasn't talking about doing things that would get him in too much trouble. But that was about it. So globally, Canada would be supported if we did it again. Yeah, and
I mean, when I was on Twitter, I mean, the feeds were just full, basically, of people sharing so much, because there wasn't just one person sharing footage. There was numerous groups, but that's all it was. And of course, Twitter doesn't like it, so people then start getting banned all over. You had a little bit on Facebook, but again, it would be very controlled. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to it, because at the end of the day, if you don't get what you wanted out of this inquiry, then it's just going to push forward, because what's coming down the pipe next is, okay, if you look at the bigger picture, did you see there's a story in Oxford in this country that they want to ban cars from moving outside of their borough, basically for a large part of the year. So you'd only be allowed out of your area for 100 days a year. And they're actually going to trial that in Oxford. They're going to split the city into 6 different boroughs, districts. I mean, what? That's bad. But that's all part of that climate green agenda.
Yeah, and I think where they're headed with that is autonomous vehicles and ride or vehicles as a service. They don't want people to own vehicles. They're headed towards vehicles as a service, like the subscription Uber type of thing, where if you just need a car, you'll order a car and it'll take you there, but you don't own a car. That's where
if you have a carbon account, which everybody would be supposedly forced to have, you wouldn't still then be allowed to, because your phone would say, well, sorry, but you're not going anywhere today.
Oh, for sure. And it's all about being able to control transportation and the movement of people. If we transition into cars as a service, on its face sounds great until they decide to shut it off. And then what do you do? you don't have a car anymore. So it may seem economically, yeah, because they're going to do the whole economic spin, and it fits right into the "you'll own nothing and be happy" mantra.
Yeah, it does.
Um,
It really
yeah,
does. It
yeah,
never
because you
did
don't own the
then.
car.
You thought it was just weird, but the more that goes on, you
Mhm.
start to look at things a little bit deeper, and you think, wow.
Yeah, and can you imagine that button on their side? We're going to do a lockdown because of whatever. Oh well, stop the cars. All right, no more transportation. You can't even order the car. Well, what about food? Well, we'll deliver food, but you're not allowed to use the vehicle. That would be like that would be like the setup.
Have
Um,
you had anything in your country about a food problem? Because here at the moment, although they tried to, well, I'll say there are numerous hundreds of fires at food distribution depots all around the world, all
yeah.
supposedly coincidental. But our government arranged for a multi-billion-pound contract for food rations. Now, this is
Oh
to
wow.
supply, yeah, this was months and months ago. Um, it's the start, I think it was in September, the contract was starting from. So it's supplying schools, prisons, hospitals, troops mainly. Now,
Uh,
why? Why?
well, yeah,
Because
good
they
question.
knew that down the pipe there'd be problems.
Well, or maybe because I'm just going to be devil's advocate on this one, or maybe they're just
Yeah.
anticipating global interruptions and chains and stuff and getting ready. Um, Maybe they have more information than we do. I've looked
Mm,
into the fires at food processing facilities. Ironically enough, there was a couple in the States where they were related to an airplane crash nearby. So that caught my attention because
mm,
the headline of the article or video I was checking out said, "Are they using airplanes now to attack food processing plants?"
mm,
So I read the article, and yeah, they were definitely taking the angle that it looked like maybe they're using pilots in this way. However, being a pilot, understanding a lot of things, I have other sources, so I watched some other stuff about exactly what was going on, weather conditions, the approach, how they were doing the RNAV and stuff like that. And nope, straight up accident, not intentional at all. It was a wonderful pilot. She did a great job. And she just happened to run into a misidentified smokestack that was put on the charts illegally. So what actually happened with that particular incident was
mm,
the Environmental Protection Agency said this particular building needs a smokestack so many feet high, and the top of that smokestack was above what the
mm,
FAA had reported for that smokestack. So what happened was, after a quick investigation, the people who put that smokestack up lied to the FAA and the EPA. They told the EPA that the smokestack is tall enough, and they told the FAA it is below that level. And the truth was, it was right in the middle of those two. So when a
crazy, isn't it?
pilot was using the data provided for the height of that tower, it was off by several hundred feet, and that was that. That was the end of that. But that was near a
Mm,
processing plant.
yeah.
It hit like the beginning of the building, and it landed on the lobby part of the building because it was a processing plant smokestack that we're talking about. Um,
Mm,
but then it was spun into, is there an attack on food processing? So that's why I'm going to push it back a little bit on that one, because I did look into some of that
mm.
rhetoric, wondering if it was real, because nothing would scare me more than kamikaze private pilots.
God, yeah.
No, seriously, because if that even happened or came close to happening, they'd be shutting down private pilot altogether. And that's a privilege and a luxury that people can use. And it's also, I think it's important for survival to be able to have all your transportation options available privately. So I would hate to see that happen. Um, so anyway, sorry to kind of take you off track here, but I
No,
did
no, no,
look into a
definitely.
couple of them. And
Yeah.
another one was, it was just an airplane crash, a student pilot. It just happened to be in the vicinity of. It wasn't even on the property of. It
Mm,
was just an airplane crash. Unfortunately, we do have private pilot airplane accidents that are
okay.
genuine.
Mm.
Um, but I can't speak
See,
to the world ones, Wayne. But what I would just kind of put out there is, once a theory or something gets spread, uh,
mm.
all of a sudden everybody's finding them all because
Oh,
they're
of
all
course.
paying attention to it now. Yeah.
It's just
So
when you start to see a rise in cases, it's like with the figures of death cases at the moment. When it becomes more common, you
mhm.
start to think, well, that's strange. Even the scientists will say, or the doctors, even on the government websites, ONS government website here said in so many months you had a dramatic increase in the deaths of people, then that's something that would catch people's eye. It's like
Oh, for sure.
all the depots. It's like, well, that's kind of unusual. Even the biggest food processing plant in France, that went up, and that was just a few months ago.
Yeah, what we'd like to see
Yeah,
then is that the
it's
cause
keeping
of
an open mind, isn't it? But still,
yeah. So for example, like deaths in Alberta went up 600% for unknown causes, ill-defined
long-term.
causes. Yeah, that's when you should really pay attention when you have a spike in unlabeled. So if you had a whole bunch of fires and they were marked as undetermined for the cause, oh my, because typically the fire department can't figure out what happened. So if we saw a spike in just labeled unknown cause, well then I would be all over that too, especially with deaths in Alberta, 600% increase over 2019 of unknown. And for the people that are listening, that's 3,362 people died in 2021, and they don't know why. COVID is listed. I think it's number 3 on the list for the deaths, is around 1,000. Drug overdose was number 10 on there. A lot of common stuff is also on there. But to not be able to know why that many people are dying with a 600% increase, and then to take down my video because we're talking the truth is a bit shocking because, yeah. Yeah. Kris, now one of the cool things you and I have been chatting about, and sorry for jumping and putting this out there, is we want to reach a lot of people because we think that voices are important and people's stories are important. And you're looking and dabbling into doing some podcasting and creating some sort of program and platform. First of all, kudos, good job. That's a great idea. It's a lot of fun. Just have your backup streams ready. That's all I can say to that. But you want to talk a bit about what you're thinking around there and kind of flesh it out? Because I know a lot of your followers are here today, mostly on Rumble, it looks like. But they're here to check you out.
Well, I think I appreciate that. And it's, I'm not a fan of self-promotion, putting myself out there.
That's the first step to podcasting, though. You got to get used to it.
That's why I'm here. And I've been working on a few things over the last couple of months, trying to see. I was really interested to see how the emergency stock was going to go, if we were going to see the rhetoric return with regards to what we see with the threats and potential reintroduction of restrictions. And I think a lot of what I get sucked into with everybody as well is that repetitive behavior of just describing on Twitter and social media what's happening day after day. And, I got to the point, I announced, okay, I'm working on an initiative, started looking at all the pillars, made it completely overcomplicated because that's just what I do. And so tackled my perfectionism and threw it off to the side and just figured, we don't have enough people out there that are looking or willing. I see a lot more defeatist mentalities coming onto, into the fray. Mental health has always been my number one thing. Even before the pandemic, the suicide numbers have always been something that keeps me up at night. And so when I thought to myself, what do people need? How do we move forward, right? Hope for the best, plan for the worst. And so I figured best way to do that is, I want to try and provide a platform for people to get their voices out. And at the same time, create a space where people can come, and if they can come away from, listening to me and whoever the guests are, or if I'm on a show, if they have the ability to come away, ideally having learned something, preferably smiling, feeling a little bit better, just to help take the pressure off a little bit. I'll acknowledge it's bad, but we don't have enough people focusing on what needs to be done on the ground. Like, how do we correct this? Because we're still very isolated. We're still, it's the reintroduction into society for those that have been persecuted over the last couple of years, and those that are those that weren't persecuted. Their world has completely changed as well too, trying to make a lot of sense of it. And so I don't necessarily want to go down the route of doing like conspiracy-based shows or anything like that, but I want to identify authors. I want to that have written books. I want to identify people who put themselves out there in the beginning, completely non-political. Doesn't mean I won't have people who are very political on, but I want to take a very neutral approach to getting different, showing people that you can have civil discourse, showing people that there are things you can be doing locally in the community. So trying to help with community organizing, having groups on that are doing that and providing them with a platform. I don't want to really get too much into debates, although we don't always agree, but when we don't agree, it's still civil discourse and we can have different opinions, and we're not throwing things at each other. And I think that if people can see more of that and have more access to positive content, but still, you know, I don't want people to think that I'm just going to turn my back on that chaos and go over here and focus on creating freaking sandboxes and gardens and stuff. Like that needs to be happen, but I find that it's sucking my soul watching the same thing over and over again. And it doesn't matter what evidence you have, it doesn't matter what the law says. None of these people are held accountable, and the suffering and the re-victimizing. And again, people get mad at me I'm not attacking the Conservative Party when I'm asking hard questions, and I think that's or suggesting that the leader should be speaking out more. I don't enjoy doing it. Honestly, every time I hit the send button, it's just. But it's a point, right? You have to if you're not going to stand up for people, and that's the realization I've had to come to in the last week or so, which is why I'm on, is that if no one is going to speak out on behalf of the people in this country, you're saying they don't have value.
Yep.
And to me, I want to do whatever I can to help them with, learning, identifying the tools they need, identifying different options for resources or a way of connectivity locally, but encourage people to stay strong. Whatever they're throwing at us, we have to be, conscious and aware of how much we're internalizing, but the rest of the time we need to be focused on, I still wake up in the morning and I smile because I'm still here. Right. And so what I do with that day, it starts. And it's one of those things. I've had a lot of mentors throughout my life. And so the ability to share some of that wisdom with people is an honor to be able to carry their legacy. And most of them aren't here anymore. But one of them was, I always say, people, when I used to be an advocate, I'd be, how are you doing today? And I said, it's a great day by day. And this Scottish guy, brilliant, really thick rolling R's. He pulls me aside and goes, no, you got it all wrong. This is when I'm in my early 20s. You got it all wrong, Kris, moment by moment. Okay. And I've lived that way ever since. And if you do that, then you'll start to recognize when you're going up that hill, have I put too much in my backpack? Do I need to stop for a second and take a few things out? Let's reflect on the good and the bad experiences, take what you learned from it, and then leave the rest behind. Because I can imagine it's extremely heavy for a lot of people right now. And, we have to persevere. We have to find a way. So that's kind of what I'm doing. It's going to be more of a, I'm hoping just to attend, be on your podcast, other people's podcasts. If you think that, can't always guarantee I'll be coherent, because even when you ask me a question, think, okay, let's process. How should I answer it? How do I not necessarily? I don't like to self-censor, but I want to make sure that when I speak, I'm not going off too deep. Where when I come back and I watch it, like with one of the answers I gave before, it's kind of like, well, I should tighten it up because it's not just us on a call here where I can qualify that. There are going to be people coming back, so it's kind of learning how to navigate through this. But if I can add value to other people's stuff, and then behind the scenes be doing interviews with, and giving them a bit of giving them pretty much creative control. If you wrote a book and you have certain questions, let's get that dialogue going. Let's get you out there. Not have any, if you can create a reputation where you're not looking for the gotcha moment. You're right. Not looking for those viral clicks, right? Like I don't really care about, I like having followers. I like the views, and that kind of stuff is important. But I think it comes more so from, if you're doing it, you're genuine, people will, if they're interested, they'll listen to it. And I think that if you create that, for lack of a better term, safe space, I think I should be able to, people will reach out, I'll reach out to them, and if there's ever ways to collaborate, I think that's the starting point of just getting more positive messaging out there.
Yeah, there's no question that we can use these platforms to do a lot more of that. And I'd like to ask Kris's followers, if you're out there, go ahead and give him a thumbs up if you think he's on the right track. Keeping it level-headed. Mental health is a very important subject. Keeping it balanced but fair, and dancing that line of self-censorship. It's a very, very difficult one. And also being political, like officially political, it's a very difficult one for me as well, because you're dancing that line of pandering. And I don't want to pander. It's not my platform to pander. If you don't like 90% of what I say, well, then maybe I'm not for you. But if you do like 90% of what I say, well, maybe look into that 10% and see why. Why are we not overlapping there? And maybe there's some room for both of us to work on that. I like to keep it, as fair as possible, but I hear you when you say, hey, look, you're going to push send, and that tweet, it may not be Pierre's best tweet of the day, but it's honest and it's frank and it's exactly what we should be talking about. Because one thing I'm concerned about is we get a Pierre echo chamber just like Justin had one. And when that echo chamber is so strong and the media picks up on it and the global media picks up on it, it becomes almost impossible to shake. And if that's what we're going to do, we're just going to have a blue Justin echo chamber. I think, it's not going to be as bad as what Justin did, but it's not going to be the best we can be. So holding Pierre's feet to the fire, I think, is a necessary job. I think if we're not doing that as independent journalists or podcasters or influencers or whatever it is that we're doing, then we're not doing a good service at all. And if you really want to just hear one opinion and one strong side, there's plenty of those out there. You will certainly find it, various levels of anger and frustration, but you'll find them on both sides. So James, I see that you're posting some good messages here. Look, man, I don't know where you live. If you're in Alberta or West, maybe we'll get together at some point. But if you'd like to be on this show, James, maybe one of your lunch breaks or something like that, let me know. We'll connect. And that goes the same for Denise and Clay and all the others in the chat. Go ahead and let me know, because we do want to bring the voice of the people to the platform. And to kind of touch a little bit on some of the concerns you had about your show there, Kris, the imperfections are what makes it genuine. When people are listening and there's a mess up or ramble or a little too long or incorrect word, what they learn right away is you're not a scripted stooge. You're also not a professional messenger. You're a genuine, authentic one. And that's what gives us a lot more confidence when listening to the real deal. Can you imagine if we were polished and professional and we had the lights at the back and all the other stuff? The quick assumption would be, well, you're media as well. Vancouver Island, right on, BC. There we go. We got another Wester, James. Yeah, if you ever want to be on the show, let me know. Just traveling at the moment. Boss is driving. Hey, boss, take care of James. We want him to be safe. And also give him an increase. He's been using a lot of his data plan this month. So give him a bonus this month. Wayne, so as you're hearing podcasting, like you got a camera, you got a microphone, you got a mug that people can look at, and you've got some stories, you got some insight, and you certainly have a lot of love on Getter and Twitter. Have you considered maybe doing something a little bit more active with getting your message out there?
Probably last year I was probably doing at least one every couple of weeks. Now, you have to bear in mind, the more time that I spend on the computer, the harder it is for me. So what I try to do is balance through my day is by having these anti-inflammatory drinks to then bring down the inflammation, because this is what makes my days so much worse. But no, I enjoy these because talking to real people, you're not only giving your point, but you're listening to their views and you take that on board. And that's a great learning curve for everyone. Plus, whoever else is listening or then following a podcast, you get a lot of empathy. But it's a win-win, isn't it? But yeah, I had thought about doing something, and at the moment it just seems to be I'm just getting back into doing a podcast with someone. I mean, obviously we had a chance conversation recently, Jason, and that's where I came from. I was speaking to UK Colin probably just so many weeks before that. There's a guy on TNT Radio. I don't know if you've heard of that at all.
No, not yet.
Check it out, because there's a lot of people that actually give podcasts, casts to it, but it's all over the world, whether it's America, Canada, and you get a lot of protest people on there, and it's very good insight. And I did a podcast on his show, Rick Munn, but they have so many different commentators. It's very interesting, not just talking about this issue, but everything to do with protesting, climate change, all the different things that are hitting countries at the moment. There's a friend of mine, she does a radio show who put the show out today, Jules Sirkin.
Yeah, I saw her tweet.
We're talking about doing something, but of course she has the same issue. So the more time you spend on the computer, the more these neurological effects really affect you. So you need to do it because you need to keep talking. But at the same time, you then have to think, well, okay, what can I do today? I can balance that for an hour and then step away for the rest of the day or something. So, yeah, it's how to go about it. I mean, I know people who I talk to, whether it's through Getter or whatever. Would it be, because I know some people in America, they purely do a sort of a helpline, kind of, through their own experience and how they've dealt with things. So you could do something purely down that road. I enjoy talking about everything, and this is why our topics will basically go in any direction, because I'm quite comfortable in the things I see and things I understand. Not everybody is quite on the same page yet, which is why you'll often see people on social media just basically drop you as a friend because they think there's something wrong with you. Well, I'm sorry, but your media isn't telling you the truth. It doesn't go down very well, which is what I'm seeing just this year, because I've been very quiet on certain social medias because things like Facebook, they really, really come down hard. And of course, those people haven't seen anything negative from my channel because they just basically won't listen to me. And that's the problem. Yeah, definitely. I'm thinking of something, but I don't quite know one or the other.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
it'd probably
I'm happy
be
to chat with any of you guys, and I'm pretty sure, because there's so many things that are relevant to all of us. And today, even just talking about protest or WF or whatever, there's so many things that are quite relevant to us. So,
yeah, I've received many comments about you being on the show. They appreciate the international perspective, outside of Canada perspective, and your actual life story is part of it as well. So who you are. So I would highly encourage you, if you need any assistance, the tech or anything like that. You have friends, and we'd love to hear more from you, for sure. And yeah, and if anybody is listening to this, what do you think about having a click-in type of show where people can, like, we used to have the old call-in shows or the AM radio type of format where you can just call in and say, hey, my name is James, I'm in Vancouver, on Vancouver Island, and here's my gripe. I spend too much on my cell phone bill. And then we go ahead and talk about it. And what do you think about that? Maybe opening up that whole, but we won't be call-in, it will be click-in type of format to get onto the show like this.
I mean, that goes in any direction, doesn't it?
Yep, you can be striked right away, or you can have a great day. And maybe we would do more Rumble based if that's kind of the format, because YouTube may be unstable. Okay, I am getting audio, but no video yet, so I'll keep an ear on that one, and then I'll pop that up when we have it.
I love the idea of a click-in. Any way that we can do anything to encourage participation, and I just think, again, of the healing factor of just, I was a crisis line volunteer for years, so for me at the end of the call, I always knew that people felt better. Not always, but just people having that opportunity to connect, engage, and vent if they need, or ask questions, and just kind of throw things into the basket and let's have some dialogue, right? Love it.
And to answer James' question, yeah, sure. Like Twitter Spaces, any platform where the voice of the people can get together and talk would be great. What I'm thinking is for more video as well. So you could come on anonymous with no video, or you can be with video.
Video is better because you'd actually connect better with people. I did Clubhouse most of last year, just talking to all sorts of people around the world, and that was brilliant. But you don't have that human connection. If you can see the look that your words have on somebody's face, it strikes such a bigger impact.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that people from all sides would feel comfortable calling in or clicking in, because I really do enjoy speaking to people with dissenting views of mine, the opposite view of mine, because that's when I learn the most about where they're coming from. I don't have to agree with what they're saying, but I certainly like to look at their perspective, because it does help. And I have noticed, quite a few times, I would adjust my own thinking when I got more information. And I think the biggest example of that would be around my empathy towards the Ottawa residents that were impacted. I can be honest when I say I really didn't care much, because I thought we have the right to protest and that's where we do it. But through some of the testimony and, opening my mind, I definitely have some empathy for them. There's no reason why we should have did all of that. I'm not condoning the EA being used because residents were upset. But keep an open mind and be open to it. Fair, James. Yep. And then Discord's another good one, James. There's a couple platforms I got to look into using because you can actually be free. Denise, all of my cameras are covered up on purpose. I don't have and never had a cell phone tracking device. You're 100% right, Denise. Yep. And that's why I can't find you. Now I know why. I'm just joking. But no, you're 100% right. I also, on some of my laptops, have, sticker over top of it because as a techie, I do know camera can be turned on with the notification light disabled. So it's absolutely possible. It's not a paranoia. Just because you're paranoid, it doesn't mean they're not watching. So keep that in mind. It's great with yeah. So something like that for sure. Rumble's going to be good, I think, until C11 kicks in. Once C11 kicks in, we might find Rumble might be closer to YouTube when it comes to forced censorship and blocking. But Odyssey is another one that I'll look at as well. I think you have to reach a certain level of subscribers before they take you. So I'll relook into that. Yeah, I'm not sure if I reached that or not yet. I don't watch the numbers like that. But yeah, so thank you very much. I do know we're going to be starting up again. And if you guys like this, look at that. There it is. If you guys like this kind of format where it's just a few of us chatting about various topics, let me know in the comments. I do read them. And if you like the idea of Kris becoming the next platform for the voice of people, let him know. Hit him up on Twitter. His Twitter is in his name here. One of the most entertaining, and you're definitely not going to get cookie cutter and echo chamber from him. You're going to get a lot more than that. Any closing comments there, Kris?
I appreciate the kind words. It's I think we're all coming together. We're all, like I said, I think yesterday, we're all white belts in this and working our way up through the process, and we'll work the kinks out. But I think that we got a good group. A lot of people just looking for something different, and if they find that with us, fantastic. So stay tuned, and it's just repetitive. You just got to keep going, keep being there, showing up, and we'll see where it goes. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited.
Yeah, we got some great voices. Yeah, we got some great voices already out there, like the Andy Lee Show, Joe Rampart, Donald Best, and soon Kris from Canada. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. He's taking a seat. I'm going to make sure the audio's on this time. Okay.
Take care, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
And if you like this video, remember to like and subscribe and press that notification button to receive more information like this. You can also follow me at yellowhead.vote to stay informed and get the inside scoop. Thank you.